Jimmy Butler represents something entirely different to what you can do and what you can add to your offense in the way that he can control it with isolation basketball, control it by getting to the foul line. And then on the other end of the floor, it's like adding one of those lockdown corners in the NFL. Like,
and now we would like to bring in Tim Legler for our Insider Access segment powered by Verizon. Visit a Verizon store, switch to their award-winning 5G network, and get a $200 gift card. We are right in the swing of things in the NBA season, and Tim Legler, of course, NBA expert, part of the All-NBA podcast, which you can find on their own YouTube channel here, and a member of the All-City Network, has taken just a couple minutes out of his busy day to join us. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be on. Appreciate you having me.
Well, we appreciate you being on in never a dull day in the NBA landscape, in the Phoenix Suns landscape, and that kind of culminated earlier this week with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's agent reportedly talked to Shams and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to talk to you about the rumors. I want to talk to you about the basketball. Let's say, hypothetically, the Suns are able to acquire Jimmy Butler for Bradley Beal. Let's just say it's a straight-up swap, even though you might have to do a little tweaking there. On the court legs, does Jimmy Butler instead of Bradley Beal make the Phoenix Suns a better basketball team?
Yeah, I believe he does. And look, by saying that, I'm going to say that requires Jimmy Butler to still have the ability to summon up his best version of himself. And there's some doubters about that because Jimmy Butler is still a guy that he kind of picks his spots in the regular season of when it's going to be meaningful to him in certain ways, but there's no question what he would bring to the Phoenix Suns in terms of their perimeter toughness defensively, a guy that can, that can get his own shot at any time, but is also comfortable playing stretches of games where he's not the primary option because that happens a lot in Miami by his own choosing, I think a lot of nights. But he is comfortable in that role, and you'd have to be playing alongside Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, because they're going to be high usage rate. They're going to be most of the time the alphas of the offense, the guys that are going to get the first crack at it. But now you have another way to play because Bradley Beal is very similar to Devin Booker in their approach and how they want to play offensively. Jimmy Butler represents something entirely different to what you can do and what you can add to your offense in the way that he can control it with isolation basketball, control it by getting to the foul line. And then on the other end of the floor, it's like adding one of those lockdown corners in the NFL. Like that side of the court's good now. If Jimmy Butler's over there because he can guard multiple positions, he can switch on to bigs and not get burned. He can guard ones, twos, and threes, and at a much higher level. Ton of playoff experience, ton of being the focal point of teams in pressure moments. All of that stuff would greatly benefit the Phoenix Suns. So my short answer is yes. It would be beneficial to the Suns if that were to take place. But there is a caveat. Jimmy Butler, I think, in my mind right now, I'm not sure I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he can go be that, quote, playoff Jimmy that we all talked about and the nickname that was bestowed upon him. I don't know. I mean, I think so. I don't think he's past that point of his career. I don't think he's that banged up physically. So I think that would be the case. And if that is the case, he is able to summon that level, then yes, you're a better team because of it, because I think it differentiates you in a way that you don't right now with Bradley Beal and I think his assimilation to Devin Booker. It's too similar. Jimmy Butler's a totally different style player, and it's an addition to your offense to make you more complete.
So on the court, you broke it down. I feel like off the court as well, there's a certain edge that a player like Jimmy Butler brings. Do you feel like the Phoenix Suns are a team in need of a little extra edge right now?
I think the one thing about Jimmy Butler, and again, this mainly applies to the important games and the postseason for him, I don't think it ever hurts to bring in a guy that is very vocal in his leadership style in those moments, because I don't think that describes the Suns' best players. And look, it's hard for role players like to take on that responsibility, like the vocal leadership, communication on the court, like mandating this is how it has to get done. Jimmy Butler's always done that throughout his career and never been afraid to do it. Even Kevin Durant, like that's not necessarily his style. He leads by showing up every night and being great and going about his business very professionally. But in terms of that edge leadership style, that's more Jimmy Butler. And that would bring something to this locker room that I think could benefit them greatly for a playoff run.
So we're recording this Friday afternoon. Kevin Durant probable to return for the Phoenix Suns tonight. Of course, their second extended stretch without KD. The team continues to struggle as far as putting wins on the board without Kevin Durant. But did you see any improvement with this squad from the first time that they missed him to the second time?
Look, I'm going to sum it up this way. You can't really even begin to quantify what you're missing when Kevin Durant doesn't play. So, can you incrementally be better for stretches without a guy like that? Yeah, of course you can. At the end of the day, Kevin Durant makes up for a lot of mistakes. Makes up for a lot of shortcomings that you have on both ends of the floor. So when you take a guy like that out of your offense that has an answer for every single type of defense he's going to see on every possession, like there is no personnel that's a win against Kevin Durant if you're the defense. There is no scheme that's a win for you against Kevin Durant, short of blitzing him every possession and taking the ball out of his hands. But even then, he's shown you he could beat you by moving the basketball. And the Suns have enough threats that you can't really beat them if you sell out to him to that extent. So there's not really anything that you have that's going to be advantageous against Kevin Durant. And he's the only player on your team that you can say that about. So regardless of playing better in short stretches now as opposed to the first time, it doesn't even matter because Kevin Durant is going to come back and he's going to erase a lot of your deficiencies by showing up on the court. And that's what you're going to see. And I think it's going to speak to the start that they had at the beginning of the year. And Kevin Durant, I think, to me, showed why this team is going to have a different narrative around them. I thought so going in. I still believe that. I haven't sold that. Kevin Durant's got to get on the court, and I think you're going to see this team, might not be right away, but they're going to hit their stride when they have everybody, Kevin Durant leading the way. This is a team that is going to be relevant in that top group in the Western Conference when it's all said and done.
So is your message to Suns fans who are kind of hitting the panic button right now, who are worrying about the play without KD, just take a breath. Let's see where we are come playoff time. And if the big three's healthy, then whatever's happening in December doesn't really matter?
It's kind of how I feel about it all because I loved the pieces that they added in the offseason, particularly Tyus Jones and somebody to organize them and somebody to help take care of the basketball and make sure that they got shots on possessions that they need to get shots, not put so much pressure on Beal, Booker, and Durant to have to handle the ball up the floor and then navigate the first ball screen and then create offense for other guys. While by the way, being guys that want to hunt their own shot. It's too much on your plate to ask all of those things. So Tyus Jones is a great addition. I thought Plumlee was going to be a nice addition for them. Ryan Dunn was a nice addition through the draft and what I thought ultimately immediately his defensive prowess could mean to this team. So I like what they did to add to the team. I also like the change that they made with the head coach and Mike Budenholzer. So I looked at all of that and said, you know what? Last year to me was incredibly disappointing the way that all played out for the Phoenix Suns. And I had great hope for them coming into the year, and it just hasn't gotten off the ground primarily because of Kevin Durant's injury. So give me a sustained sample size, a much larger sample size with everybody on the floor. And I think everybody's going to see how good Phoenix can be. And they might become a team that might not be a great defensive team, but they might be so good offensively at some point that being mediocre defensively is going to be enough to make you relevant.
So you mentioned the other people and the other guys being injured too, and that's going to lead me to one of our diehard questions I'm asking you today. If you want to be able to ask a question to NBA expert Tim Legler, join our diehard Discord. Go to gophnx.com, click on that diehard tab, join today. This comes from Trash Gamer. Says, obviously the Suns have been struggling without Kevin Durant, but they've also missed some other players, Ryan Dunn, Yusuf Nurkic, in this stretch of time without him as well. You already touched on what the Suns were missing without Durant. How much do those other players factor into this recent struggles of missing them at the same time?
Huge. And also, I mean, I think you could probably even throw Grayson Allen in there as well. I mean, Grayson Allen hasn't been the same guy in terms of impact, and he started the year behind the eight ball a little bit, was dealing with some stuff coming out of camp and had a very slow start to the season. He hasn't been close to what you expect from him and what he did a year ago. So he'd be another guy that I would throw in there. Josh Okogie's missed time. They have not. And look, I will say this also. At some point, like you start to not give teams the benefit of the doubt or players the benefit of the doubt that they're ever going to be healthy. Like I'm kind of at that point in New Orleans. right? Okay. Oh man, well, Zion's only played 6 games. Well, you know what? It's like, okay, that ship has sailed. They're never going to be healthy. Like you start to buy into that mindset. I'm not there with Phoenix. I'm just not there that that's how it's going to be. They need their entire rotation, but all of the guys you mentioned that have missed time, the role players that maybe haven't been up to their career norms or what you expect them to be, all of them have their table set by the best players on this team, starting with Kevin Durant. So when those guys have missed time, they're already a little bit disjointed, out of rhythm. Now, in addition to that, you don't have the guys at the top of the food chain that break down defenses, that draw multiple defenders to them at all times, that make the game easier for the role players. When you add up those two things, you get a number of guys that aren't playing well collectively at the same time. And as a result, you get basically a 500 team. And I think Phoenix is much better than that.
So you mentioned that you're not there with the Phoenix Suns yet. I personally agree with you, but what I'm kind of chewing on is at what point do you get there? Because you've been through a season where it's up and down with the big three. You don't get them on the court at the same time. And then you do in the playoffs and you still get swept. This season, is there a certain point that you're like, okay, if January, February comes and we haven't seen a 10, 15 game stretch with a healthy roster, do you feel like that's something that you might go to and say, I'm done expecting that from this team?
Yeah, yes, it has to happen before the All-Star break. Like at some point between now and the odds 2 months, over the next 2 months, you have to give me a 15, 18, 20 game sample size where everyone's out there. And that's when you're going to start to see the results. You're going to start to see the wins coming together at a high rate, the consistency with which their offense is operating. You will see it. But if it's not there by the All-Star break, you still have all these disjointed numbers, and it's very simple. All you got to do is pull up the statistics page on any website you want to go to and just go down the games played list and look how weird it looks, how disjointed that looks, how few guys have been available all year. Everybody's missed games. That has to change. Like those numbers have to change. And when that starts to change, I think you're going to see the results on the court start to change. But for me, yeah, if you're coming out of the All-Star break and you're talking about, okay, well, here we go. We got at that point about 25 to 28 games left in the season. I mean, it's not, people think All-Star break is like midway of the season. No, it's way past that. At that point, you're in a sprint to get ready for April 15th or whenever the date around then, the beginning of the playoffs are. So if you haven't reached that point, a sustained run of your main rotational guys playing together, then at that point you kind of go, you know what? It's not going to happen this year.
Last question for you, Legs. Of course, if you don't know who Tim Legler is, welcome to the sport of basketball. He's absolutely everywhere, including our All NBA podcast with Adam Morris that you can find on the All NBA YouTube channel. Are the Phoenix Suns even fully healthy? Are they too small in the modern NBA? I know that you believe in this team that they could be good fully healthy, but is that kind of that big problem for them if everybody is on the court and playing?
That's definitely a challenge, and it's the biggest one. But look, you can more than ever get away with undersized lineups in this league because more and more teams are employing them. There aren't that many teams that you're going to get beat up physically, but there are challenges regardless. And you even saw this with Oklahoma City a year ago. They had the number one seed in the Western Conference, but so think about that. They pulled that off. An incredible year for those young guys. Number one, best record in the West. Of course, they lose in the second round of the playoffs, and they lost to a team with a bigger front line, a team that beat them with lob threats, and even their perimeter player Luka Doncic could kind of beat them up a little bit physically because of the way that he plays. And you know what they did in the offseason? They went out and they're like, okay, we have the best record in the West. What are we going to do? We're going to go get bigger because we're not big enough. So to a point, yeah, there's certain teams that are going to be a problem against, and they're a problem for everybody. But most nights in this league, you can get by playing smaller teams, particularly if you have a guy like a KD who's slotted in at the 4 spot defensively and the ground that he can cover and then the matchup advantages he's going to get the other way. You can survive most nights in the NBA now with those types of lineups. But eventually, yes, the threat of you running into a team that's just a little bit too big and physical and you get thrown around and you can't really guard them, that presents itself potentially down the road at some point in the playoffs.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, Legs, of course. If you are trying to keep up to date with the entire NBA, highly recommend the All NBA podcast, of course. Legs all over ESPN as well, calling games, analyzing games, just everywhere. The busiest man in the basketball business, but he carved out just a little bit of time for us. Make sure you go support him. We appreciate you joining us for Insider Access, powered by Verizon.